Alright, so in my last video I showed you guys how to do the trailer hitch wiring, and I also had to remove the rear bumper to do the routing that I chose. This is the 4-pin trailer connector down here, coming out of the OEM grommet. Everything real clean. If you haven't seen that video, check it out because I do show how to remove the rear bumper. You do need to take the rear bumper off to get the hitch on, so check that video out to learn how to take the rear bumper off. So at this point there's not a ton of work to do. We just got to take the bolts that hold on the rear crash beam, pull that off, slide the hitch in between, and bolt it back up. One thing worth noting with the sport model is I don't have the rear parking sensors in the rear bumper of this car because it's a lower trim. So in the Curt installation video they show you have to take a Dremel and cut out a piece of the crash beam here. You're not going to have to do that if you don't have a Sport Touring or an EX with the rear parking sensors. Now's a great time to coat the inside of the frame hole with some fluid film or some blaster surface shield. I like this stuff a little better actually. If you live in the Northeast and deal with salt, it's just good assurance to help keep corrosion away from the inside of your frame. I'm also going to be spraying the inside of this crash beam a little bit now that I have better access to it than when it's installed on the car. So this here is the hitch itself. I just got done painting it with a can of Rust-Oleum Flat Black. As I'm sure a lot of you know who have installed these hitches in the past, the OEM powder coating is pretty beat up by the time it gets to your house in the box. They pretty much just ship these receivers loose in a box, and they're missing tons of paint and have bare steel exposed when you get them. Masked off the Curt logo there. You can see this is rated for 2,000 pounds and 200 pounds tongue weight. But this will just install in between the crash beam. Of course, Curt provides locking washers and their own hardware with longer thread engagement for making up for the thickness of the steel plate sandwiching in between. So this little tab here is a feature used to align on a feature on the OEM crash beam, and the added thickness of this hitch is making it difficult and pretty much impossible for that feature to drop down on this hook. After fighting with it a little bit, I determined we need to bend these out of the way, so I'm just taking a piece of wood. Just bend those down a little bit on each side so that they're not pointing straight out, and then you're going to be able to bolt up the crash beam without an issue. So I'm going to use a little bit of blue Loctite on the threads for all 8 of these bolts when I'm putting them in. It's a conical tooth washer. The points on the washer, which are the teeth, are facing the steel, so they bite in and they don't slip. Once you get all the bolts threaded in, I use a little blue Loctite. You're going to want to torque these down to 16 foot-pounds. Alright, here's a quick look at everything. The hitch installed. And look at the center dot in between the frame there and get a good visual on centering the hitch because it is slotted side to side, so you can make some fine-tune adjustments before you torque it down. It looks pretty solid, feels pretty good. Now's a great time to take your blaster surface shield or fluid film, whatever you want to choose for undercoating, and just get the hitch real good up inside the bumper and everything that won't be exposed once you get the bumper back on. Here's a look underneath the car, how the hitch sits. One thing that's worth noting is the OEM rear jack point. They do leave like a solid inch between it, so you can still put like a hockey puck or a piece of wood on a jack and jack straight up on this jack point and not have any interference issues. All right, so what I have here is a Civic LX or EX rear diffuser, OEM from Honda. This is about $42. So the EX and LX is a lot simpler of a design. There's no fake vents or fake exhaust look to it. You just got this real clean angled stripe on the back here, this accent, and then the sides where the exhaust is on like the Sport Touring is just flat. You know, it's just a flat piece of plastic. The OEM Sport Diffuser that came with this car has this fake style, you know, it kind of looks good, the fake style diffuser edges here. But then it's got these fake exhaust, like vent looking pieces here. And I'm not really the biggest fan. That's the only like fake vent looking thing on the car, and everything else is functional. I'm gonna be switching out this diffuser with the LX/EX diffuser. So another thing that's nice about not having the diffuser on for myself to document this is I'm gonna put the OEM bumper on without cutting the crash beam and see if there's any contact with these edges on and the bumper, because according to the Curt instructions, you're supposed to take a Dremel and cut out this corner on the top on each side to clear the bumper. So I don't know if that was something related to the parking sensors or maybe even a 10th generation Civic. I'm not sure, because this hitch is the same part number as the 10th gen Civic as well, I believe. So being that it's a universal fit, I don't know if the rear bumper is shaped differently on the Sport. And install your screws up top here. So this OEM piece, when I took it off the first time, broke a tab up top and kind of broke the tab on the bottom. The only one that's left is really in the center. So putting this back on is a little bit of a pain, and it's not really staying. So I assume these are only a few bucks. I'll probably order a new one from Honda to throw on here, but this one, I'll just pop it in. It kind of sits in there a little crooked, but just leave it in there for now until I order a new one. This side, somehow I got lucky and none of these broke, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop this back on. Without a rear diffuser installed, see your exhaust nicely, but just gives you a better visual on how the hitch fits into this vehicle. All right, so one thing I did want to point out, and I was talking about earlier, is the reason to cut the rear bumper beam. This is how much room there is. There is over like an inch still between the rear bumper and the crash beam without cutting it. So you don't have to cut it. I don't know, like I said, if it's in relation to the parking sensors on the higher level trims, but on the Sport, you don't have to cut anything on the OEM bumper beam. It is over an inch clearance on each side. The only part that does get close to the bumper beam now that it's moved out, probably 3/8 of an inch, is the bumper here before the diffuser is. These are the diffuser mounts, these little tabs in here. So they're pretty much going to contact the bumper beam when it's in its natural resting place. I don't know if it is actually pushing outward on it at all, but there is like this little rubber foam piece from the factory right here that is it is now touching the bumper. I don't think it was touching before. Okay, so the Curt instructions say to do a 2.5 by 4 inch deep cut in the center of the rear diffuser. I just measured the hitch and it looks like it's just under 2.5, so the 2.5 looks fantastic. I will double check the 4 inches, but we're gonna go ahead and cut up the diffuser at this point. So here is the LX diffuser and the OEM Sport diffuser behind it. If you're gonna be cutting the Sport diffuser, it's actually pretty easy because you have the center diffuser fin that marks the center of the molded piece. On the LX, you really have no idea, so you probably should measure between these two mounting holes and mark a line halfway between those two. I got my 2.5 by 4 inch cutout kind of marked and scratched in with a pick here. I'm going to go ahead and drill out the corners so I have a nice radiused edge. I'm going to grab a drill and line it up tangent with these two edges. Run a Dremel straight across to connect to the edge of the circles and cut this out, and we'll test fit it on the car and see how close I got. The bit is going to be grabby with that plastic. Alright, so as you can see there, got two nice circles cut at the edge of my profile here. Now I can just connect the dots and Dremel this thing out. Alright, not the prettiest thing in the world, and it's, like I said, it's a little harder to do on the LX or EX diffuser here without that center rib guiding you, but that's what I ended up with. Let's go ahead and throw it on the car and see how it looks. Here's a look at the finished product with the Civic LX or EX diffuser. This is kind of how the hitch looks. With the Sport diffuser, you had that center rib coming down, so it may have been slightly further out. I will say, looking straight down from this, I do wish this hitch was like a 1/2 inch shorter. I don't like the look of it kind of poking out from the rear of the car. If you look at it from the top, looking straight up and down, you can see that it is pretty much flush with the edge of the bumper. It's just a little bit of an illusion because this diffuser kicks in and then has this lip towards the bottom and then exposes the hitch right there. Let's take a little bit more detailed look underneath the car. You can see the 2.5 inch cutout worked perfect. The 4 inch is, you can see a little bit of daylight through there. So getting a measurement, yeah, it looks like you can get away with 3.5 inches from this back edge, would clear the hitch no problem. 4 is about a 1/2 inch too far, but keep that in mind. Maybe I'll cut my Sport diffuser to 3.5 now. But pretty clean fitment. Like I said, I will be doing something with this here in a minute, so stay tuned for that. Final solution to mount that. But pretty happy with the way this came out. Like I said, if it was about a 1/2 inch shorter, overall, pretty happy with it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.